lot of people keep saying, I mean, the usual naysayers say there was no concept of India. It was only when the British came, we got India and so on. So if that is the case, then there is nothing called mainstream. There is nothing regional. There's no central thing sitting in Delhi or somewhere, which makes it, that is the center of this nation. And then you have all these regional satraps. So every part of India is mainstream. I think Ponniyin Selvan did that. It rekindled that interest in the Chola history, which probably no history book could have. I'm told that after the movie came out, the original novel by Kalki actually had a huge surge in sales because people wanted to read the original book, which was written way back, maybe pre-independence times or so by him. Vikram was also, and we shared the name, and I think that was another nice bond. And I remember every meeting with him, I used to tell him, like a little child under a tree of knowledge. That's how I would view him. And his breadth of knowledge across disciplines, like that fascinating story where the Dutch governor comes to him and threatens him, saying, I'm going to invade your kingdom. And this man haughtily replies that even I'm planning to invade Europe. It's just that my fishermen and their boats are not yet ready. And even small dynasties that probably ruled Delhi, the Tughlaqs and Lodhis and Khiljis and all these people who really did not have much of a great contribution to this country, the incommensurate importance that is given to them. So I indulge very less on Twitter and try my level best to focus all my attention and energy only on writing and research, which is my forte. Immediately in the aftermath of what happened in the part of partition, the scourge of partition, the kind of bloodshed, the kind of violence that we saw, maybe a new nation that was grappling with how to build itself from the ruins of partition probably thought it prudent, rightly or wrongly, that these inconvenient truths, particularly when it comes to conquests, invasions, particularly the Islamic conquest, which someone like a Will Durant had called as one of the bloodiest stories of human history, not just of Indian history. So I think we owe it to our ancestors, we owe it to this nation that at least these stories are mentioned. It's always politicized. It is the handmaiden of the ruler. So either way, people are going to use it in some way or the other.
Hello everyone, welcome to News 18. We have with us Dr. Vikram Sampath here. He's here to talk about Brave Hearts of Bharat, vignettes from Indian history. Thank you so much for joining us, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
The first question, of course, is this an attempt to move away from the Delhi centricity of historians as we've seen over the years?
I think so in some ways, because I think the focus of Indian history is so much in and around Delhi. There's nothing wrong. I mean, I have nothing against Delhi or so. It's a lovely city. I love coming there every time. But still, all our, whether it's media narratives, whether it's the way history is seen, Delhi occupies a lot of importance, and naturally so, because it's the political capital. It's where all the buzz is. But even, in the way our history books are written, the amount of detail and the amount of importance that, even small dynasties that probably ruled Delhi, the Tughlaqs and Lodhis and Khiljis and all these people who really did not have much of a great contribution to this country, the incommensurate importance that is given to them, or of course the Mughals who ruled that region. While it's not my case that anyone needs to be excised from the historical narrative of India, but I think all parts of India need to be included if you're calling it a history of India. So South India, different parts of the South, the Northeast, which never gets featured in our mainstream narratives. I think it's important to have all these stories from different parts of India. So this book tries to balance that out. In the 15 heroes and heroines that I have selected, they come from different parts of the country, right? From Kashmir, Punjab, Uttar Pradesh, Rajasthan, Gujarat, all the four southern states, Assam, Manipur. We know so little about these areas. So I think it's important to have an inclusive kind of a narrative when we call it, as I said, the history of India, and not restrict it only to a certain region.
Right. You're also a historian in the era of Twitter. So that has to be a different place altogether, because you're fighting with people on Twitter at one time, otherwise who haven't read a book in their life at all. So how do you see that battle playing out?
That's a great question. I don't fight any battles on Twitter anymore. I think I was doing it several years ago. I realized that that's a losing battle which you can't win. Especially, I mean, there are many people who make all these long, long threads on
Yeah.
Twitter trying to rebut. But I think, I strongly believe while every medium is important and that's an important platform, and facts, counterfacts are important everywhere. I'm an old school, historian who believes that scholarship and books are what will last. Today's tweet, after 2, 3 days or next week will be forgotten. But a book is something that will be remembered. It will be on the shelves. Probably long after even I'm dead and gone. So to that extent, I think there's no substitute for real scholarship and books. So I indulge very less on Twitter and try my level best to focus all my attention and energy only on writing and research, which is my forte.
Was Brave Hearts of Bharat a harder task compared to the two volumes of Savarkar? Because of course the Savarkar volumes were quite heavy. This is a thinner book, but there are a lot more people here, and there's a lot more to research here.
Yes, I think that was correct because my publishers Penguin, they literally conned me into this by saying, after writing this huge 2 volume biography, just do a quickie, a quick
Yeah.
read for people and so on. So I also said, okay, I think that makes sense. I also need a little bit of a break from the hardcore full length biographies. But I later realized that this was equally tough, if not more, where delving into 15 diverse people, their lives, and in the process also my own rediscovery of India, to say, going to all these places, accessing a lot of regional literature in those languages from where these people came from, getting used to a lot of these local oral traditions, folklore, and all of that. So it was a lot of hard work. Of course, each person probably just gets about 20, 25 pages, so
Mm.
the length of that is not as much as the Savarkar volume, but still the amount of effort was quite immense and intense also. But it was very rewarding because, as I said, I got to re-know my country in a
Yeah.
new light, thanks to this book.
We've also spoken about how we have to face inconvenient truths, we have to face uncomfortable truths. Can you explain
Yeah.
why these truths were ignored? Initially, of course, the reason given was, say, nation building or trying to pacify everyone. But now, in the age of the internet, is this the perfect time to face those truths, or should they have been faced earlier?
Yeah, I think what could have been done in the past can't be undone. So you're right. I mean, the immediately in the aftermath of what happened in the part of partition, the scourge of partition, the kind of bloodshed, the kind of violence that we saw, maybe a new nation that was grappling with how to build itself from the ruins of partition probably thought it prudent, rightly or wrongly, that. These inconvenient truths, particularly when it comes to conquests, invasions, particularly the Islamic conquest, which someone like a Will Durant had called as one of the bloodiest
So yes, yeah.
stories of human history, not just of Indian history. So I think we owe it to our ancestors, we owe it to this nation, that at least these stories are mentioned and not actually whitewashed, not subsumed, and behave as if these things never happened. And anybody who
Yeah.
brings these out is doing it out of some political agenda or motivation, which is completely, baseless. Just telling the truth as it is, and making peace with it, and moving on. And I think there is no need to, I time and again repeat that there is no need to hyphenate today's communities of whichever faith with any of these invaders, because they're not responsible for it. We should not make a situation by using history that we somehow make today's people responsible for this. So it's neither revenge histories that we're talking of or retribution that way. At the same time, to appease a particular group of people, you don't need to have icons of that same community and then fabricate and whitewash and remove all their omissions and commissions and then make them squeaky clean, which doesn't help the cause of either knowledge or of history, or least of all of social harmony as people thought it. So I think now the time has come, as you rightly said, it's the information age. People can easily access whatever they want to access. And that's why there is this clamor everywhere that we have been taught wrong history.
Yeah.
And people, especially the young people, are quite upset about it, and they would like to know the truth. And anybody who shows a little bit of it starts becoming like a beacon of hope for many of today's young Indians.
One of the bravest things that you've done or have said is the fact that it can be used as jingoism when we talk about our ancestors having fought these battles and have won them. It can be used as a jingoistic thing by politicians. I mean, I think Jinnah did it initially when he called Qasim the first Pakistani. So, I mean, this is something that has been happening for a long time.
True, true. So yeah, that's a very good question. It's a slippery slope,
Yeah,
Navneet, that yeah, and history is always weaponized. It's
yeah.
always politicized. It is the handmaiden of the ruler. So either way, people are going to use it in some way or the other. But I think the task of a historian, according to me, someone who's honest to their craft, to their profession, is just to illuminate the archives, illuminate the facts, and bring those out into the public domain, irrespective of what who will think what will it, is it politically correct today, and all these kind of considerations. I think beyond that, if you're honest to your profession, you need to tell the truth as you see it, as the archives and the documents and the facts and sources narrate that story to you. And but then it is inevitable that I think politicians and people with vested interests, they are going to manipulate history one way or the other to their advantage. It's always been happening. It will continue to happen, but that shouldn't deter, or that shouldn't force historians to think in a particular way, or chart a particular course of action, which is important.
Coming to the book, how many of these characters did you learn of while you were writing, and how many of them did you know earlier before you became an author yourself?
Well, honestly speaking, I think barring two or three,
Yeah,
I really didn't know about most of them myself. The Cholas, of course,
yeah,
I'd probably heard of. Lalita Aditya. Some of them you just know the names,
yeah,
like Begum, even Begum Hazrat Mahal or Chand Bibi and all that. We've heard the name somewhere, but details about who they were, I had no clue. But other people like Banda Singh Bahadur, Lachit Borphukan, or Rajarshi Bhagyachandra Jai Singh of Manipur, Kanhoji Angre. These people were not. Abbaka also, though I come from Karnataka, the vague mentions of her, but didn't know much about her. So it was as much a discovery for me in the course of this process as it will be for the reader who will read the
yeah.
book.
We've always heard that India is a country that never colonized any other countries. Then there was a rebuke that Cholas were colonizers. You make the point that Cholas, the colonization was cultural. It was not
Hmm.
bloody as it was the case of India when we suffered colonization. So, can you tell why these points come up every now and then? Why these debates rage on? Even now, when we'd heard that Cholas were not really Hindus, and
Oh my
television debates went
God.
off the cliff. So, how do you see these things?
Those are, I think, ridiculous. I mean, someone who built some of the greatest temples, the Brihadishwara temple, the Gangaikonda Cholapuram temple, and who worshipped every, sect or branch within the Sanatan Dharma, be it Lord Vishnu or Shiva, or Lord Shiva, Kartikeya, Ganpati. They had Nishumbha Sudhini, the goddess Durga, as their family deity. To say that they are not Hindu, I think it is just meaningless
Yeah.
trope. It's all again done for, I think, contemporary politics and just for some cheap publicity here and there. But yeah, the other point that you raised about colonization, that's important. That we, though the Cholas did plunder and they did invade Sri Lanka, they what is Sri Lanka today, and Maldives, and they did attack the 14 ports in Sri Vijaya, in the Malay Peninsula. But strangely, I think our psyche was not wired that way, that the war actually should mean that that land becomes a part of your as a colony, as a distant
Yeah.
rule. It was largely for trade purposes, for commercial purposes. So even when they attacked Sri Vijaya or whatever, they would get all these passports and concessions for Tamil merchants to keep going back and forth. And so there was a lot of osmosis of people, a lot of to and fro, people moving, trade happening, and with that culture also moves where trade goes. And so that's how Hindu culture or Tamil culture actually managed to go all the way to various parts of Southeast Asia, and even in in Lanka and all these places where they had in fact destroyed Anuradhapura, which was the capital, and established a new capital. The Chola king would never go and send someone from his own court to go there as a governor, as the Arabs were doing at the same time, in Sindh and other places they had conquered. So here, someone in the local vicinity itself, someone from a estranged part of the family whom they had vanquished, they would be placed as a vassal or a tributary, and they would be allowed to have their local rule. And of course, with time, there would be a local rebellion and the person would reclaim the kingdom. But this seemed to have been the model of India, where, of course, there were wars, there was plundering, there was all of that. But this idea of distant control, which later came to be known as colonization, that doesn't seem to have been part of our psyche. The cultural and the trade elements seem to be more important for us.
As a Malayali, I was excited to read about Martanda Varma.
Yeah.
Were there characters you were excited to write about, that you enjoyed researching and that you didn't know a particular facet that kind of excited you about them?
Well, yeah, I mean, so many, as I said, so many of them. Martanda Varma too, I knew about him, but the details, like that fascinating story where the Dutch governor comes to him and threatens him, saying, "I'm going to invade your kingdom." And this man haughtily replies that even I'm planning to invade Europe. It's just that the my fishermen and their boats are not yet ready. And once we get ready, we'll sail the high seas and come and attack Europe. And he followed up that bravado with the Battle of Kolachal
Yeah,
a few years later in 1741, which kind of completely vanquished the Dutch East India Company.
yeah,
So I think, but beyond, Kerala and few Malayalis who may know about him, I don't know how many in the rest of India really have heard of Martanda Varma, someone who laid the foundations of the Travancore, kingdom and the dynasty. So it's very, very sad that, many of these, like, or Nike Devi of Gujarat, who is said to have vanquished Muhammad Ghori in the Battle of Kasarhada in 1178. No, I had no clue that such a person existed or there was such an important contribution. So each story gave me, I think, these very valuable nuggets of information, a lot of valuable insights into their life too. Even Ahilyabai Holkar, whom I feature in the book, so many times we walk in and out of Indore. The airport is named after her. You see her idol there everywhere, holding the shivling there. But then all the human stories of her, of how her own daughter committed sati and how that impacted her, or what all she did for making Indore a prosperous kingdom. These were very human aspects of their lives, which I think I discovered, and these were the joys of discovery through the process.
yeah. I mean, these kings are Indian kings, but every now and then you hear that these are regional kings. Now, consider for a second that we consider them as regional kings. When What do you think the role literature and cinema plays? We saw with Ponniyin Selvan, suddenly Cholas became very popular. Can you tell us a bit about how literature and cinema will play a role in the future when it comes to understanding these ancient kings and their ways of life?
Yeah. So first of all, I strongly oppose anybody calling any of these regional. So
Mm,
first of all, I mean, a lot of people keep saying, I mean, the usual naysayers say there was no concept of India. It was
yeah,
only when the British came, we got India and so on. So if that is the case, then there is nothing called mainstream. There is nothing regional. There's no central thing sitting in Delhi or somewhere, which makes it, that is the center of this nation. And then you have all these regional satraps.
yeah,
So every part of India is mainstream. So if the Lodhis are mainstream, the Cholas who ruled for 1,000+ years, how are they regional? They are as important as anyone else. So first of all, that regional mainstream, this business itself, I am totally opposed to, and I think each of these are equally important in
yeah,
the larger narrative. And I think that ties to your first question to of how we look at it only through the lens of one part of India. Cinema and literature. Literature is what maybe what I'm doing, but cinema is as a visual medium. Of course, it has a greater reach, a greater kind of an impact on people who may not be prone to the practice of reading, and it has the visual impact is always there. I think Ponniyin Selvan did that. It rekindled that interest in the Chola history, which probably no history book could have. I'm told that after the movie came out,
The book
the
sales.
original novel by Kalki actually had a huge surge in sales
Yeah,
because people wanted to read the original book, which was written way back, maybe pre-independence times or so by him. So I think cinema and the visual medium has that impact. And today, the best part is we have so many avenues for that. It's not just
yeah,
cinema; it's OTT platforms, it's YouTube, it's all kinds of other things, social media, where, as you said, Twitter has its pros and cons, but social media also has its advantages. You can make things more interesting, more visually appealing, because people's attention spans are also dwindling and becoming smaller. They probably can't read a 600-page book, but 1 hour movie, which gives you everything, or a 15-minute YouTube narration of the same, is probably more better consumable. So I think all these avenues should be used to popularize these stories of the past, which have been forgotten.
a bit off topic, but there are these tags that are attached to historians. Some are called historians, some are called popular historians, some are called. So these tags. How do you see these tags? Because, for instance, if you're talking about people living in the 1950s, say Pandit Nehru's discovery of India would be called a work of popular history, or R.C. Majumdar's work would be called as a historian's work. And now we're at a stage where these tags are again being attached. So how do you see this this diversion?
I mean, if someone is popular, it should be worn as a badge of honor. I mean, nobody is writing books so that nobody reads it.
Yeah,
You want, as a writer, whether it's a historian or whatever, I think you want your work to reach out to people. So if you're popular, that doesn't diminish your work. I think the problem comes when, particularly in history, you have fence sitters who, I mean, who dog in the manger, who particularly those who are in tenured positions in colleges and universities, and not all of them, but some of them, who think that the entire subject is only their prerogative, and only if you are teaching in a university, then you are capable enough to comment or write about history.
yeah,
Now, history is nobody's personal fiefdom. Just because you have a degree on a piece of paper, that doesn't qualify only you to actually investigate that subject. There are others who, like, I have a PhD in history and music, but I consciously chose not to work in the university setup, but actually be an independent researcher
yeah,
and work. So I think research for the book, it needs to be intense, it needs to be meticulous, but it should be accessible research, which a common person can also read and access. A lot of academic books, particularly in history, are written in such an boring and an obtruse manner that most people would probably not go beyond a few pages. So what's the point of doing all your research if nobody is reading it, or it's just in a small clique of people? So I think this haughtiness and having this privileged clubs saying, we belong to some very privileged old boys club, and anybody who's on the outside cannot come in, and they
yeah,
constantly need to keep proving their credentials and proving their worth. I think that is increasingly the norm these days. But the best part is people are seeing through this, and the same people who talk about privilege and classism and caste and so on. This is a kind of a caste hierarchy of itself, that we are
yeah,
the privileged, the Brahmins of this group, who will
yeah,
not allow anyone else to come inside our cozy club, which is not, I mean, today everything is democratized. These stories of the past are as much yours, mine, anybody else's, and we all have a right on it. And no one has
yeah.
some, just because you've passed out from some place, you don't have some, exclusive rights over using that.
Yeah, yeah. I've always wanted to ask, how do you, who are the historians that you've sort of looked up to? I'm sure R.C. Majumdar is one of them, but I'd also like to ask you, how do you see V.S. Naipaul's works? Because there were these interviews in the 2000s where he said that Babur was no friend of India, and that the plunder and the loot was sort of brushed under the carpet. How do you see
Yeah.
these people? How can you tell us a bit about this aspect of your life?
Yeah, I mean, I've initially, to be honest, my earliest this one was of Jadunath Sarkar,
Hmm.
and his work on Aurangzeb and Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj. I mean, here was a man who also learned Persian, actually
Yeah.
decoded most of Aurangzeb's inscriptions, and thanks to him, we know the history of the Aurangzeb's times in a much more comprehensive way. A lot of them, Sita Ram Goyal, Ram Swaroop, Dharampal ji, lots of them who've worked a lot, but hardly known that way to the larger. I think their books are also not in circulation, though some of them have been reprinted
Yeah.
now. Uh, in recent times, we have people like Professor Meenakshi Jain, who's written
Hmm.
extensively on several topics. So I think there needs to be a democratization of the space. It's for the longest time been occupied by only people of one particular ideological dispensation, which I think is detrimental to the cause of the discipline. Because here is a discipline like history which should thrive on multiplicity of opinions, a diversity of views, different. There should be healthy discussions, differences of opinion. You can't stifle all opposing voices and actually, then claim to be talk of academic freedom and all of that, because there needs to I think now that space is opening where
Yeah.
within outside the system too there is mushrooming of multiplicity of voices,
Yeah.
and Nepal is again a very important voice, though I mean not completely a I would not say a completely a historian, because he
Hmm.
was treading the middle path between fiction, between history, and all of that. But yeah, these are important. Like even S.L. Bhairappa
Yeah.
from Karnataka, who wrote on historical themes as historical fictions, but they were extremely well researched and based on facts. But these were intertwined with a story to actually make the point. So all of that becomes important to when you're talking about stories of the past.
Last two questions. You're working on a book on Tipu Sultan, if I'm not wrong, right now.
That's right.
So,
That's
so how has the research been, and have you already started getting messages?
Not yet, thankfully, touch wood. But yeah, I've started the research, and I think that will lead me a lot even to your place in Kerala,
Yeah.
because considering the Padayottam that he did there, and
Yeah.
the loot and plunder and all of that. So he's a historian's enigma. I think he has so many shades to him,
Yeah.
and it's characters like that which make researchers' life interesting. If it's very very linear, simplistic, monochromatic, it is no joy. I think these multiple shades which make a person so, such a mystery. I think that's what makes it intellectually very, exciting and curious
Yeah.
for a historian to work on.
Final question. I've just been going through your Instagram page, and I didn't know you're
Ah.
close to Vikram Seth. So I have two questions to you. First, do you have a scoop on the suitable girl? And second, how has he influenced your life? Can you talk a bit about that?
Oh my God. Okay. That was a googly question. I didn't expect at all. Yeah, he's someone I totally look up to. I mean, his mother, Leela auntie, and my mother were friends. My mother was deeply, inspired by some of her work, her writings, her book, and all of that. And, and Vikram was also, and we shared the name. And I think that was another nice bond. And I remember every meeting with him, I used to tell him, like a little child under a tree of knowledge. That's how I would view him.
Yeah.
And his breadth of knowledge across
Yeah.
disciplines, across, he'll talk 1 minute about Mandarin, at another
Yeah.
time, he will talk about Western classical music, and then shift to poetry and make it all so interesting to someone who I just sit with my jaw dropped for hours together over a drink, and then it would be like the Niagara Falls of knowledge. So I think, and we've sadly, especially after Leela Auntie's demise, he's gone into a cocoon, and there's hardly any connect with the rest of the world. So not spoken to him in a long time, but he'll always remain an inspiration. And his books, even in the shelf
Mm.
behind, I think a lot of them are Vikram Seth's books. So
Thank you, sir. Thank you. That'll be all. Wonderful talking to you. Such an honor.
Thank you. Lovely,
Thank you,
lovely
sir.
talking. Thanks for some
Thank you.
excellent questions.
Thank you.